Hey, Ted. I was a postdoc with Ted from 97 to 99. Before that, I spent 5 wonderful years with Arrow back at his UPenn days. And those few years at MIT were great. Yair was there, Josh was there, David Summers was there. It was just a great group of people. We got to hang out. And one of the great things about it was Ted gave us a lot of intellectual freedom to think as young academics. And as I was thinking about the last 25 years and what I wanted to talk about today, I was reminded of this email that Ted had sent me. This is from August of 2018, so about 4 years ago, and it reads, "Hi, Hany. By the way, this is completely out of the blue. It just dawned on me that the field you helped found is basically fake news detection. Don't read ahead. And this field has grown from a quirky niche," I think that's a compliment, I'm not sure, "into, in capital letters, the most important topic in the world. I've never seen Ted yell in my life," and this is a little disconcerting to see Ted yell even in email. "So we're in your hands, please save us." And then he ends very helpfully with, "It does seem hopeless, Ted." This email haunted me for a couple of years. And so what Ted was talking about is when I was in his lab, I started thinking about how you can detect manipulations in images. So for example, was Ted in fact part of the Beatles here on the left? And we developed a suite of tools from analyzing lighting and shadows and geometry and reflections and compression artifacts and sensor artifacts and optical artifacts to try to understand if an image had been manipulated or not. And this is in the early days of the internet and digital revolution as we were just starting to see digital manipulation take hold. And then we eventually migrated over to video and started thinking about if we could detect whether a video was manipulated or not. Maybe a video something like this. Don't let Ted's calm demeanor fool you. He's got game. Ted, I've got like a whole bunch of these. I'll show you later. Emily was very patient with me making these for a couple of days. Okay, so we'll do them tonight. So for years, during my early career at Dartmouth, we used these techniques in what, as Ted said, was a fairly niche field. We used them in criminal cases and civil cases. We use them with the Associated Press and Reuters to deal with breaking news a couple times a year. We worked with human rights investigators a couple times a year, but it was very much a niche field. And then something started changing, and that's what Ted was alluding to the fake news problem. And that's what we're going to talk about today, some of the way we've been thinking about the information apocalypse that is upon us. And to set the stage for this, of course, misinformation is not new. Let's go back to 2015. 2015, according to public policy polling, 4% of American people believe that lizard people control society. That's not a euphemism. People actually believe that there are lizards in human clothing that control Congress. If you've met Ted Cruz, that doesn't seem like an unreasonable position. 7% of people believe the moon landing was fake. 14% of people believe Bigfoot exists. 15% of people believe the US government adds mind-controlled technology to TV. And you could say, all right, who cares? People believe silly, stupid things. Who cares? But here's the thing you should understand about these conspiracies, is that what comes with these beliefs is another belief that powerful people, governments, elites, the media, are keeping the truth from you. And as a result of that, this was setting the stage for an erosion in trust in the governments, in scientific experts, people in this very room, and in the media. And now fast forward to 2016 with the rise of Trumpism and the normalizing of lies and conspiracies and nonsense, and now we're off to the races. So that in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, surveys that we and other people have done found a much more troubling prevalence of belief in things that are not true, like 17% of people believe the core tenets of QAnon that posits that Satan-worshiping, cannibalistic pedophiles plotted against Donald Trump during his time in the White House. 22% of people believe that Bill Gates plans to use vaccines to implant tracking microchips. I would like to ask these people why Bill Gates has to put a tracking in them if we've all voluntarily strapped the mother of all tracking devices to our face 18 hours a day, but it doesn't matter, it's fine. 37% of people believe that global warming is a hoax. Not that it's not happening, but that it's a hoax. And 53% of Republicans believe that Trump is the rightful president. Now you are talking about existential threats to our planet, to our health, and to our very democracy. And this is why Ted panicked and sent me that email 4 years ago. Now, why did Ted say it seems hopeless? Because the scale of social media today, where the vast majority of Americans get their, if you can call it this, news, is huge. On Facebook alone, 700,000 posts per minute. On YouTube and TikTok, 500 hours of video every minute. And on Twitter, 350,000 tweets per minute. This is the mother of all data dumps. And thinking about how you moderate the illegal, the awful, the conspiratorial, the lies seems simply overwhelming. And this is why Ted panicked. Now, in some ways, you sort of just like, all right, let's turn off the internet, forget it. But this isn't really the true internet. We don't navigate the internet as a data dump. So for example, if you go to YouTube and queue up one of Ted's talks here, you will find some recommendations on the side here. And in fact, on YouTube, 70% of all watched videos are recommended by YouTube, not organically navigated to. By the way, Ted, I didn't actually listen to your talk, but I'm really curious about what you said in the talk to generate these recommendations, which are Richard Dawkins stunned by stupidity, Reagan tells Soviet jokes, and why are there no bridges in East London? So I'm going to go back and listen to the talk to figure out where those recommendations came from. 70% of watched videos are recommended. And so the internet is maybe not quite as big as we thought it is, because maybe if we think about what is being recommended by the YouTubes and the Twitters and the TikToks and the Facebook, maybe we can paint a slightly different picture. And that's what we did. So over a 16-month period, from October of 2018 to February of 2020, we probed YouTube's Watch Next recommendation on 1,000 news-based channels. So what I mean by that is we simulated watching a CNN video or a BBC video or an MSNBC video, and then we just looked to see what YouTube recommended, randomizing user profiles, geolocations, and all that. And over that 16-month period, we collected 10 million recommendations from YouTube. Okay? Every single day, we ran this process for 16 months. And what we were particularly interested in were conspiracies. And now, reasonable people might disagree on what's true and what's not, but we focused on conspiracies because it's relatively unassailable in terms of defining them, and we have 4 criteria for determining that something is a conspiracy. It explains events as secret plots by powerful forces, think QAnon, contradicts scientific consensus, the Earth is flat, not supported by evidence, lots of things fall into that category, and is self-fulfilling or unfalsifiable. So that is, if you find evidence against your conspiracy, you simply fold it into conspiracy as the person saying that is part of your conspiracy. Okay, so those 4 criteria. And what we did is we labeled a big training set and we built a classifier to determine, it would ingest a video and determine if it was conspiratorial or not, to determine what YouTube was recommending. And we looked at 3 things: the comments associated with the video, the snippets, which is that short description under the title, and then a transcription of the actual underlying video. Single most predictive thing, by the way, is the comments. And if you've been on YouTube, you actually know why that is. Nothing fussy here, very simple natural language processing. Here are the words that were predictive of whether a video was conspiratorial or not. So for example, on comments, Illuminati, evil, research, deep, hoax, global, control, believe, autism, satanic. Here's my favorite one, they. The word they are doing this to us. Here's my other favorite one. In the snippets, people just write the word conspiracy. These are not hard to find. This is a very, very easy problem, okay? They're not trying to hide. Unlike criminals, people who believe in this want to be found. They want to be discovered. Okay? And so we built a classifier, and we took those 10 million recommendations, and we shoved them into the classifier and just wanted to see what YouTube was doing. Okay? And here's what we learned. So horizontal axis is time. October of 2018, slightly after January of 2020, just before the pandemic. The vertical axis is the percent of videos that are conspiratorial as recommended by YouTube. And please remember, these are on news-based channels. So you go to the BBC, the New York Times, or CNN, and then at its peak in December of 18, 10% almost of videos being recommended were conspiratorial. That's insane. When 70% of all videos watched are in fact recommended. Now, fast forward, we're watching every single day, we're doing this calculation, but in January of 19, under pressure from the EU, the UK, YouTube announced that they are going to fight disinformation, okay? And so we thought, oh great, we'd already started the study, let's see what's happening. And in fact, by June of 19, that number went down to about 2–3%. Big drop, and then after that, it fluctuated between 2 and 5%. Okay? So you could say, well, this is good. We're down by about a factor of 3 in terms of recommendations, but that hides an important information here, which is when you look at the conditional probability of being recommended a conspiracy, it paints a very different picture. So in late 18, if you watched a conspiratorial video, you had a 70% chance of getting another conspiracy. This is the rabbit hole or echo chamber that people talk about. That number dipped down to 54% and then down to 30%. That's still a really big number. So if you do start going down conspiracy land, you are going to go into a rabbit hole because YouTube recommends that for you. Now here's where it gets really interesting. What happened here in this 1-month period where you saw a precipitous and pretty steady drop in recommendations? What we found is we went back and looked at everything that was being recommended, and as far as we can tell, the only difference were 12 channels. That's it. They simply stopped getting promoted. So all YouTube did is nothing complicated, no classifiers, they just turned off recommendation of 12 channels, and you saw this rapid drop in the promotion of conspiracies. And YouTube is not alone. On Facebook, other studies have shown that 12 people are responsible for half of COVID-related misinformation. On Twitter, 1 person, who's a little orange, is responsible for the vast majority of election lies. There's a relatively small number of people responsible for the vast majority of disinformation. And so that huge number that I showed you earlier actually starts looking very different when you think about these recommendation algorithms. Now, that's a particular social media platform, a YouTube or a Facebook, and we were curious if this would extend to the internet as a whole. And so what we did is we collected thousands and thousands of information and disinformation domains, www.rt.com, www.newyorktimes.com, and we looked at their interconnectivity through hyperlinking. So we're going to build a graph. All the nodes are domains, and there is a connection between them if one domain hyperlinks to a story in another domain. And we just wanted to see if we could see patterns in this. And I'm not going to talk about in this detail, but I'm going to show you one result. So here is a subgraph where at the center of that graph, that dot right in the middle, is a far-right disinformation peddler, okay, well known. All of the links from everything you see out here go into that, over 1,000 of them. But now you see another really interesting pattern. All of these little satellites, what are those? Fully interconnected, but disassociated from each other. These are imposter local news organizations. So for example, there's one from Connecticut, there's one from Massachusetts, one from Alabama, one from Tennessee, and they look like local newspapers. But in fact, all they do is connect to each other. They're all identical news stories, identical ads, identical everything. And then they funnel traffic into the one far-right organization. All of these satellites, except for the cluster here, one organization. Metric News Media controls over 1,000 of imposter local news that are funneling into one more bad actor here. So even at the network level, despite there being millions and millions and millions of domains out there, relatively small number of bad actors. So the bad news, Ted, is I do believe that disinformation is an existential threat to society and democracy. I think we are seeing that in very real terms today and in the near future. That's the bad news. The good news is the internet is not nearly as big as we think it is, because there's a relatively small number of people responsible for a phenomenal amount of the problem, and that means it's more manageable. And in fact, I would argue that the number of people responsible are even smaller than that, because the social media CEOs and the wannabe CEOs have the power to change the recommendation algorithms to make them honest and civil and decent and not exactly the opposite. And so in fact, I think the problem is more tractable. Now, this is a day of celebration and joy. I think it'd be pretty uncool to leave you with a slide of these two knuckleheads. So Arrow thought he got away with it. He saw that video of Ted. So I'm going to leave you with this video, and you guys can determine for yourself if you think it's real or not. Thanks, everybody. Where's Tony? I didn't see him. Oh, he's hiding in the back.
Hey, we have time for questions.
Fredo.
Hello?
I have a contrarian perspective.
Good.
I find that image manipulation and video manipulation are surprisingly not used very much in propaganda and fake news.
Yeah.
I mean, as you showed, it's incredibly easy, and especially with pictures, and it's been easy for decades now, and yet, you don't see it.
Yeah.
And it's not like we don't have bad actors who are willing to manipulate. In Project Veritas, there's really questionable stuff.
Yeah.
Editing, for example. And I don't have a good explanation as to why, the bad people who want to do these bad things that have this tool that's really easy to use don't use it.
Why aren't they using it more? Okay, so what Fredo's asking is, why are we not seeing more deep fakes and more manipulated images? And I think there's a few reasons. One is that people are pretty stupid. And it turns out you don't actually need a sophisticated fake. You just tell them the world is flat, and people are like, well, all right, that sounds good. Yeah. So I think that's part of the reason. Having said that, you are seeing manipulated images. So for example, out of Ukraine, we have seen manipulated images, we have seen deep fakes, we have seen misattribution. So we are seeing it, but I agree with you that the vast majority of the problems, vaccine, global warming, QAnon, are not image-based. Now, I suspect as these technologies, these are, by the way, deep fakes. This is the latest incarnation of using machine learning to create deep fakes. As they get better and more commercialized and more easy to use, you're going to see them. I will mention the last thing is that where you are really seeing the weaponization of this content is in non-consensual sexual imagery, where people are taking images, likenesses of women, inserting them into explicit images, and carpet bombing the internet with it. And that is a very real problem. And the last thing I will say is that I would argue that the real problem of digital manipulation is not the manipulated images themselves, but it's the liar's dividend. That we have now entered a world where if any image video can be manipulated, well, then nothing has to be real. And I see this on a daily basis where images and videos of actual war atrocities come out, and Putin says, well, it's fake. And now we're off to the races. So I would argue that's the bigger threat here, but I do think it is just a matter of time before deep fakes become so easy to make. This is, by the way, these were done in an app that I downloaded for free. And so as this gets better in the coming years, I think we'll start to see bigger threat vectors.
Well, let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.